Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room as we march into 2023 and look at issues that are local, regional, national, international, right across the globe. I'm Robin Adair, and right across town is my partner in crime, my co-host with the most, the Croatian sensation, John Jurisic. And John, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Robin. Happy New Year to all of our viewers. Best wishes for 2023. You know, I always do this little quirky little thing where I go, okay, am I going to remember 2023? Do I remember 2013? Do I remember 2003? Do I remember 1993? Of course, I don't remember any of those. So I hope 2023 will be more memorable. But you know what? There's going to be a few hoops, a few ladders, a few barriers, I think, in 2023 that we're all going to have to collectively cross, like trying to find out where to fly or how to fly anywhere in the wintertime. I'm not going to do that. So many people I know have canceled and delayed flights. They've lost luggage. I mean, I've seen on social media these pictures that I can't even comprehend. They're stranded for days in airports. I remember a time when if we were late 2 hours, I'd be annoyed. You know, it's been a brutal holiday season for people wishing to travel, Robbie.
Absolutely, John. It's been terrible. And, you know, to be fair to the airlines, and I'll be fair to them a little bit because I have a lot of friends that have really had a mess to deal with over the holidays.
Right.
To be fair to them, they were very depleted of staff, resources. During the COVID pandemic, there were so many fewer flights. Airports were essentially shut down for a while, and they haven't got their staffing numbers up. And then suddenly, bang, we have a Christmas where everybody's traveling. Everybody wants to get out and see family because it's been 2 or 3 years since people have traveled, and the airlines just haven't been ready to pick up the slack. And, you know, we talk about the COVID pandemic being a cause of this. Speaking of the COVID pandemic, we have more to report because we have a new ugly strain rearing its head. And, you know, John, the situation is XBB. It's something that I think people need to hear more about.
Robin, I can't believe we're still talking about this. This used to be our lead story every year, even before, obviously before VRR. And here we are still talking about it. It's the latest Omicron variant of COVID-19. And it's been sweeping across the US, the UK, and certainly will have an impact in Canada. The bad news is that vaccinations won't necessarily keep you from getting this new XBB virus. But the good news, Robin, is experts don't believe it's any more dangerous than the regular Omicron, just more contagious. So whatever your opinion is on masks, wear them. So COVID's still with us. And unfortunately and dangerously for the world, it's really taking off again in China.
It is, John. And we're seeing that very clearly. Big outbreaks in China. A lot of people believe that's where the whole COVID pandemic started in the first place. And the Canadian government is now demanding that anyone arriving from China, that includes Hong Kong and Macau, have to show a test that they do not have COVID, that they are COVID-free. It has to be done 48 hours before they travel. And the new arrivals are certainly going to get a lot of scrutiny on Canadian-bound aircraft or aircraft that are coming in here from Asia, and the same requirements in places you mentioned all over the world. United States next door have the same requirement. So COVID is still in the headlines. And John, I just want to mention something about this. There's so much social media right now knocking COVID vaccines again, saying COVID vaccines themselves are causing far more deaths than COVID itself. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And if you are a viewer that doesn't believe in getting a vaccination, fine. You have the right not to get a vaccination. If you want to take the chance that you could get COVID and get seriously sick, fine. I say that's on you. But if you want to come into public space in an airline sense, then boy, I hope you're wearing a mask. I hope at least you're wearing a mask. And these are all things we have to be thinking about as we move forward. And for people who are seeing this stuff on social media and wondering about it, It's not from really highly accredited doctors and medical associations. It's from a few disgruntled doctors who want to be heard. It's an ongoing, raging debate. And you and I have always stood foursquare with getting vaccinated, John, and I continue to feel that way.
I can't believe this is happening, Robin. I cannot believe that there are folks still wondering whether this helps or not. We are pro-mask, we are pro-vaccine, and we will always be on the VRR, and we will always tell everyone to do the same. The shortage of doctors, however, and the long waiting times at our emergency rooms remains a headline as well. So sickness upon sickness upon sickness, and the solutions are still not making themselves readily available. You have to wonder if our medical system is going to need a lot more changes than just money. Healthcare is a mess in Canada, and so is drug addiction, mental illness, and homelessness. You're right. We keep doing shows on this month, day after day, month after month, year after year, and we've got a ton of viewer mail recently on this hot topic.
That's right, John. We certainly have. And, the Rumble Room recently featured Jeff Bray from the Downtown Victoria Business Association talking about the fact we have so many organizations helping people that are homeless and enabling people to stay on our streets, and people from other parts of the country are coming to Victoria because they know we're going to be so receptive. So we keep putting more people in housing, and yet more people are arriving and living in tents. So Jeff Bray's wondering whether this is a good way to go. And we also spoke to Troy D'Souza, who's a Victoria lawyer, who talked about something is wrong when we have this catch and release system and so many people are reappearing on our streets. And Troy D'Souza talked about, the fact that we don't want to be throwing people in prison. We want to find ways of taking care of people, get people in for mental assessments and mental health help, and also addiction help. And that's what the associations behind these people are asking for and pleading for. So it's expensive, but we have to really look at it. And I think that a lot of our viewers are resonating very strongly with this. Stacy writes us, mental illness is mental illness. There should be no separating addiction from mental illness, period. The newest neurobiology says so.
We also had a fascinating note from Larry Stevenson, who we've interviewed several times on the VRR. Larry is the CEO of the Island Corridor Foundation, and on this issue, Larry writes, I was particularly interested in your discussion on the homeless, unhoused, and the discussion around resources. Larry, who isn't? I would suggest that resources are stretched everywhere, and in large part because we have allowed this to persist. Instead of addressing the problem, we are reacting to the problem. There are lots of costs that go undocumented. We have an ongoing problem with the unhoused occupying the rail corridor. We spend a tremendous amount of time and money dealing with these folks and then cleaning up after them. No one captures those costs, and I can assure you they are substantial. I hate to imagine what the province and municipalities are spending.
And we really appreciate hearing from Larry. We appreciate from hearing from all of our viewers, whether we agree or disagree. We like to get these views on. Linda writes us, the best way to clean up the streets is to build more than one mental hospital, because these people are in need of more than a hospital psych ward. They need a roof over their heads, a warm bed, and most importantly, their medication, not street drugs. And as I say, we really appreciate people writing us letters. We're getting tremendous feedback on Facebook, Twitter, all of our different platforms. People are writing and expressing their points of view, and we do try to share these points of view on a fairly regular basis. And we also enjoy getting special guests on the show that have messages they'd like to convey. For example, our next guest is talking about how he is preparing for a snap election.
It's the time of the season, Robin. Oh my gosh. Kevin Falcon has been working hard rebuilding the BC Liberals, including a new name, whether you like it or not. These are soon to be the BC United Party, which will be, and the name will be soon unveiled in I guess a few weeks, maybe a month or so. As leader of BC's official opposition, Kevin's been working so hard that he actually managed to catch a cold, not COVID, a cold. But he still agreed to join us in the Rumble Room. So let's Zoom him in.
Now joining us once again in the Victoria Rumble Room is the leader of British Columbia's official opposition, Kevin Falcon. And Kevin, great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Robin and John. Good to be here again.
And we're launching off. We're launching off with our new year of shows with Kevin Falcon. And I seem to recall we did something similar last year. We had you on quite early. And a lot has happened, obviously, since that time. David Eby has been very busy as premier. He's been rolling out all sorts of goodies. There's been news about public safety, housing strategy, $5 billion surplus. I mean, who ever heard of an NDP government with a $5 billion surplus? And now we have an Angus Reid poll out that shows that he's almost got 50% of British Columbians already in the bag. And you're trailing. We had a scenario like this a long time ago. It seems like a long time ago, the last election, and John Horgan took advantage of that and ran a pandemic election. Does this mean we could be into another one this spring?
Yeah, it does. I think so for sure. I mean, I said to my caucus right from the outgo that, look, I don't trust David Eby at all, to be honest with you. So I think we have to be prepared for a spring election, regardless of what he says. And we will be. We'll make sure we're ready for that. But look, I think with that poll, the poll doesn't surprise me at all, and to be honest, although I don't pay a lot of attention to polls. I always say to people that, the polls, I spend most of my time traveling in this province talking to thousands and thousands of British Columbians. I can tell you, you can feel the winds of change out there. I knew it was going to happen in our by-election that we had in Surrey South. A lot of people didn't believe me then. The NDP actually thought they might win that. We won by 22 points. I knew it when the local elections were happening. I knew in Vancouver that the left was going to get decimated. And sure enough, they did, even though the polls showed they were neck and neck. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about polls. But the one thing I will say about those polls that was interesting to me, because it reinforces what I have been saying since I've become leader, is ignore what the NDP says with their announcements and promises. Focus on the results. And what those poll results show is what I've been hearing from British Columbians. People are fed up with the results we're getting in healthcare. They're terrible. They're really fed up with the results we're getting in crime and what's happening in our streets in terms of social disorder and chaos. And they're not happy with the results we're getting in housing affordability, where we've ended up with the highest housing prices in North America under 2 terms of the NDP. So if results matter to people at all, this is not going to be the government for them.
Kevin, great to have you back in the Rumble Room. Thank you very much. Let's start digging into these policies, the many of which you just reviewed in your previous statement. BC doctor shortage means 1 million British Columbians are without a family physician still. But now the NDP has settled a massive contract with the doctors. They've also announced expanded medical training at UBC and SFU, and even opened the door to foreign trained doctors. Do you think this will actually significantly reduce the doctor shortage?
Not in the short term. And this is what I really think the public has to understand. This government's been there for 2 terms. They should have been doing this stuff 5 years ago. Expanding the training spaces for doctors should have been something they started early in their term, because they could have looked at the same data that's available to all of us if we care to take the time, and we would have seen that over the next 10 years, according to the doctors of BC, 40% of the current doctors practicing will be retired. And so that means if it takes 7 to 8 years to train a doctor, they should have started a long time ago. Now, what they have done is and we were calling for this months ago, asking them to get moving on this stuff, to show some sense of urgency around the crisis we're facing right now, where 1 out of 5 British Columbians cannot access a family doctor, where 1 million British Columbians are on a wait list to see a specialist, when we've got, parents showing up at emergency departments waiting 10 to 12 hours just to have their sick children looked after. This is the product not of the last month or 2 months, but the last 5.5 years of mismanagement of the system, I would argue. And it doesn't change overnight. It's kind of like a big ocean liner. You could slowly start to turn it. But, these decisions require, leadership. And I think the fact that they've waited until we've been badgering them over this and only responding now is too little, too timid, and too late.
We're going to shift to homelessness for a minute. It's interesting to see the government has been kind of, trying to do something about it without doing the things perhaps that really need to happen. In other words, they put a lot of money into social housing to take people out of tent cities and move them into housing of some sort. And it's been very mixed. Some of them have stayed in the housing. Some of them are out in the streets. Some are not interested in any of these social moves, and it's been very expensive. And at the same time, the government has now announced under David Eby, there's going to be a new program of evaluating people and getting them in for treatment or getting them in for mental health adjudication. And it seems that you talk to some of the experts in italics, and they'll tell you that we need a lot more mental health facilities and a lot more places for people to go in for drug addiction treatment where they have to stay there. And without that, we're only going at half purpose. What's your view?
You're absolutely correct. And look, I've been saying this now for even before I returned to public life. 2 years ago, when I was in the private sector, I wrote an op-ed piece that ran in the Vancouver Sun, which, by the way, the NDP responded to through Judy Darcy, a former NDP MLA, and their former mental health and addictions minister, highly criticizing the approach I took. But what essentially I said in that, Robin, was this. We have to recognize as a society, we have failed those with severe mental illness. And this is not a decision of this government or my government when I was back in office, or even it actually goes way back to social credit days when there was a North American-wide movement to shut down institutions. But what happened was society made a decision to release all these folks back into the general population without the proper supports that they really needed and deserved. And today we're facing the consequence of that. What I've said very clearly is we need to have a modernized version of what we used to call Riverview and Essendale and Trunk Hill up in Kamloops. And, apartment-like settings with 24/7 psychiatrists and medical specialists to look after these folks and give them the care and attention they need and deserve. And that will be a big part of solving some of the social disorder and chaos that you see out in the streets. What David Eby and the NDP have done over the last 5.5 years, they've been warehousing these people. They bought motels, hotels, then they stick them in there with severe those with severe mental illness and those struggling with severe addictions. They put them into these places. There's no proper supports for them, and it creates chaos in the surrounding communities. And it has been an utter policy faceplant. But my point is this. We have to take a different approach, and we have to, really treat those with severe mental health issues appropriately and give them the services and care they deserve. Then what we have to do is make sure we invest in treatment and recovery, where our focus is actually helping addicts get off their addictions and into treatment and recovery, not just do what this government does, which is to say, let's decriminalize hard drugs, whether it's fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and let's make sure we get safe drugs into the hands of addicts. Well, I can tell you this will not end well. I want to be really clear about this. You go look at what's happening in San Francisco or Portland or Seattle, and this model does not get you the result you hope to get. And I think it's important that, maybe you have safe drugs as part of the continuum of care, but my God, the primary focus has to be on helping people get off of their addictions and to become contributing members of society. And so that's the big shift that we will do that's very different. And here's the reason why, Robin. Just put aside all politics. I don't think there should be politics when it comes to mental health and addictions. I think all we should care about are what results are we getting. And if you look at the results we're getting today, opioid overdose deaths every year over the last 5 years have been the worst they've ever been in the history of this province. And yet this government will say to them, and say it publicly, we're just going to do more of the same thing and hope to get different results.
Kevin, please, let's talk now about affordable housing, a file that I'm very familiar with here on Lower Vancouver Island. And the question being, do you agree with David Eby's new housing strategy? For example, new legislation that allows the provinces to override municipalities to get projects approved, and now ordering all condo buildings to open their doors to renters.
Okay, so two things. First of all, again, this is classic NDP maneuvering. So what they do is They ran on a platform in 2017 of saying they were going to bring about affordability in housing. And they said the problem was foreign buyers, evil developers, and Chinese foreign buyers essentially was their big thing. And here we are, almost 6 years later. They're in their second term, and we've ended up with the highest housing prices in North America. So again, big promises, terrible results. And now they're saying, okay, so now they're going to bring in changes. But he did not bring in legislation doing what you suggested, which is, or what they suggested, which is to bring in legislation to ensure that we get more supply into the marketplace. What he did do was bring in a piece of legislation that said, we are going to set targets. We're going to sit down with up to 10 municipalities. We will establish targets for housing, and then we'll see how they do in achieving those targets. If they don't achieve those targets, we'll have meetings with them, and we'll talk about why they didn't achieve those targets, blah, blah, blah. It's just bureaucracy. There already are targets. And the problem is, with the rare exception, like, maybe Coquitlam and City of North Vancouver, nobody's meeting the targets. So what I have said, and I've been very clear about this, a Kevin Falcon-led government will bring in legislation that says the approval process is going to change, and it will be streamlined to provide certainty and timeliness so that we get those approvals and get new housing into the market as much and as quickly as we can. We need to flood the zone with all kinds of housing, condos, townhomes, you name it, towers. We need it all.
So here's a name for you, Danielle Smith. You've probably heard of her. She's the Premier of Alberta, and she has this little thing called the Alberta Sovereignty Act that's getting an awful lot of attention, overriding some federal policies and jurisdictions and legislation, or at least that's the idea behind it. And I guess that includes a lot of things around energy in Alberta, but people have said, well, if it was applied in BC, maybe that would apply to things like catch and release and the way we deal with our serious criminal problem here. What would your government do differently or similar to what Alberta looks like they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go down that path because I've always believed that the approach that we took when I was in government, and Gordon Campbell's direction to us as ministers, was always work with the government, the federal government. And the way you work with the government is important because you have to be clear about what your priorities are. So if and I see this NDP government really missing the boat on this one because they have a million priorities, and you can't do that with the federal government. They don't have the ability to focus on more than 3 things at a time. So you have to go to the federal government and be very clear about what it is you're looking for from the federal government. One of the things that I would do is go to them and say, Bill C-75 that you passed in 2019, the end of the year in 2019, has been really problematic for a lot of communities because you set the bail provisions, you made them so lenient that it's been much easier for criminals to get out. Now, that's been accentuated by an attorney general that we've had in BC for the last 5.5 years named David Eby, who very much endorses that approach. That was his whole background prior to getting into politics, was working for Pivot Legal Society and the BC Civil Liberties, calling for more restrictions on policing and police and all the rest of it. He wrote the manual how to sue the police. So he accentuated the problem, made it worse to a point where we now have a situation in virtually every community in this province where crime is spinning out of control. And only now, in their second term, after 5.5 years, David Eby becomes premier and says, oh, now I'm actually quite concerned about the situation that I have overseen for the last 5.5 years that's got completely out of control. And he says he wants to try and make some differences and some changes. But, frankly, I don't believe it. And once again, I'm going to be looking to results. Now, just think about this for a second. In Vancouver, a city I grew up in the Lower Mainland, 4 people a day being attacked by random strangers. That's almost 120 people a month. And that's just the reported cases. And that includes stabbings and beatings and a young 19-year-old Asian woman being hit over the head with a steel bar by an individual who's been arrested 50 times in the past. The situation is totally out of control. And we need leadership to change that. So I would go to the federal government and say, we have to work together to make this better. And I think if you do that in a constructive way, then I think you can start to bring about some change.
Always interesting to hear from Kevin Falcon. Hope he's feeling better as we move into 2023. He's going to need all of his energy. It's going to be a very tough fight against David Eby and the NDP right now. They're in very, very good shape in terms of the opinion polls. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know that there's going to be a snap election. I think that it's tough to say. And if I was David Eby, I don't know if I'd be, take the chance. He's going to ride in. He's got a couple more years in his mandate. Why take the chance? I think it's going to be a slugfest when it happens, but I'd be surprised to see it happen that fast. But who knows? So Kevin Falcon, he's living it, so he maybe knows more than I do. We'll wait and see what happens. And John, on that happy note, it's almost time to wrap. Again, you could tell our beloved viewers, and I believe we're up to what, about 750,000 views so far on the show after a year and a half. So we appreciate all those viewers out there. How can they follow the Rumble Room and join our merry band?
Absolutely, Robin. I try to tally our votes. I'm already thinking that way. Our viewership on a monthly basis. So I have to get a tally up at December. We're averaging, close to 50,000 views a month. Yes, we are over 750 and moving on to 1 million. What's fascinating about the show, which I just love, and we've been reflected in our show today, is this entire sort of community of people that are yakking and commenting on these shows. Like, there's a lot of comments. And if you want to spend some of your idle evening time, come on board and watch these, read these comments on our Rumble. You can see it's a new year. I need to get it back in gear. How about this is where you do it? We have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter page. We have a YouTube page. We also have a news group in which you can post your events and stuff like that. We also post our show on Instagram and in what is increasingly notorious platform, TikTok. So for all of our viewers, and for what I think is going to be a really crazy year, I remain your faithful comrade in arms and Croatian sensation, Johnny Jurisic.
And I remain Robin Adair. And rumble on!